patterns and practices.
Exactly. Together, we'll transform this assessment into a catalyst for positive change and propel our practices to even greater heights.
Right. So now, without further ado, it's finally time to take off. Let us begin by outlining the learning outcomes for today's session. By the end of our time together,
We'll move beyond the textbook definitions and explore how assessments is a natural part of our everyday decision making.
we'll introspect how assessment isn't just a one time event, but a continuous cycle of gathering information, reflecting, and adjusting our approaches.
Next, we'll reflect on how assessments involve multiple cycles of feedback and adaptation, and how they can be used to compare a learner's current performance with their past achievements.
Also, we'll gain insight into the latest educational frameworks and explore how they reimagine assessment as a holistic and learner centric process.
And we'll unpack the core principles that guide assessments in the early years for education, focusing on the importance of developmentally appropriate practices.
Finally, we'll take home how assessment can be seamlessly integrated into our daily teaching to inform instruction, support, learners' growth, and create joyful, meaningful learning experiences.
So, are you ready with your tea or coffee? Let's sit back and enjoy this audio visual break that will set the context.
In the beginning, assessment was simple. We'd give something a try. It was obvious when we did not succeed. And it was obvious when we did. This became known as learning. Then formal education arrived. And we invented universities and lecture halls, lesson plans, and final exams. We tested students to see if they learned anything. And then we assessed our own effectiveness as teachers through anecdotal questionnaires and subjective end-of-semester surveys. And this might have been enough when we were graduating high school and college students to take predictable jobs with predictable career paths. But today, educators and students are part of a rapidly changing world. 21st century learners must be able to synthesize knowledge, communicate clearly with others, and create solutions to problems that we don't even know exist. Which means students need personalized, engaging, useful feedback on meaningful work, not multiple choice exams and unexplained letter grades. So whether you're teaching accountants, engineers, artists, welders, scientists, or nurses, your students need detailed feedback on meaningful work so they can become learners, not simply graduates.
So we all agree assessment has gone from being a final judgment to an ongoing conversation. We've discovered that it's not about labeling learners, but about peeking into their marvelous minds and finding creative ways to help them shine.
So, let us celebrate this shift from summative sentencing to formative fun as we explore how assessments can truly empower our learners to reach their full potential.
Yes, it is up to us as educators to create a nurturing and inspiring environment for our learners. Remember, their success is our success, and it all begins with us.
And it is time to invite and introduce our chair and co-chair for this series. No, wait, chair and co-chair? What?
Not real chairs, Anubhav, but chairperson. We are pleased to invite our chairperson, Ms. Pooja Agarwal, a trailblazer in education. Pooja ma'am, our founder director with an impressive background in child psychology, educational research at Oxford, and advanced leadership training from Harvard, has dedicated her life to revolutionizing the educational landscape. With her innovative approaches to curriculum design and educator training, we are sure to know what we can bank on. And we are eager to learn from her insight today.
So with Pooja ma'am today, we also have Ms. Anubha Banerjee as the co-chairperson. Anubha ma'am is highly accomplished educationist with extensive experience in assessments and curriculum development. Her passion for education and commitment to creating lifelong learners makes her an invaluable asset to this discussion. So over to you, Anubha ma'am and Pooja ma'am.
Yes, Anubhav and Pooja ma'am. Before we invite ma'am, here's a gentle reminder. So thank you everyone for joining our webinar. Our meeting room has reached full capacity, but don't worry. Please share this link with your team members to watch the live stream. So we are sharing the link in the chat window. The same link has been shared in your respective school groups. They will be able to view the presentation and listen to the speakers. For questions or comments, they can use the live stream feature on the streaming platform. We will post the attendance link in the live stream as well. We appreciate your understanding and participation. Thank you so much. With this, I welcome Pooja ma'am and Anubha ma'am. Over to you.
So, namaskar, everybody. I'm extremely delighted to see you come together in large numbers and invest time and effort to understand and adapt to the evolving landscape of assessments. So I look forward to an insightful session where each one of you will go back with an enhanced understanding of assessment.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. I am really, really glad to see that the educators have joined in such great numbers. And, I think that this is a fantastic opportunity, ma'am, to begin with an assessment to gauge our audience's understanding, existing knowledge of assessments, and what they're eager to learn about. So, participants, we are going to do a KWL visible thinking routine, which you already know about. We're going to do it in the form of a poll. We're going to ask you two questions, right? One pertaining to what you already know, one pertaining to what you want to know, right? The questions are on the screen. You can choose more than one answer. So the first question is, what do you know about assessments? Remember, you can choose more than one option. What assessments are, types of assessments, purpose of each type of assessment. Do you already know what each of these is, when each of these is conducted, how assessments help in tracking learners' progress, how to maintain authentic records, right? That was the first one. What do you already know? And what more do you wish to know about assessments? Again, it's a multiple choice. How to make assessments inclusive, how to incorporate differentiated assessments, how to manage time, how to give feedback, how to keep children focused and engaged, how to give instructions, how to use CSS for assessment, how to maintain an authentic record of assessments, how to track learners' progress, how to identify what is within the syllabus and what is out of it. And the final point, the different tools and ways of assessments, right? So I think we'll give you another 20 to 30 seconds and then we'll end the poll. Let's see what is it that you already know and what you want to know. So I can see the answers are coming in fast, ma'am.
Yes, and I'm so happy. And I would like to emphasize upon the fact that this is a part of formative assessment, right? So when we do formative assessment in our classrooms, So we try to figure out what the learner already knows and what is it that the learner wants to know. So whatever I'm going to do in the webinar series, perhaps it is very important for all of you to correlate with what you do with your learners in the classroom. So everything, every tool that we are going to use today in the webinar series, please correlate with what you do with your learners. So when we start with assessment, first it is important, what our learners already know, because doing something repeatedly, which the learner already knows is a futile exercise and waste of time and resources for practitioners as well as learners. It may result in disengagement of our learners. So, Surya, can we publish the poll results? Okay, let's see.
Okay.
All right.
So what we see here, ma'am, yes, so the poll results, I hope it's visible to everyone. It is. All right. So what they already know in great numbers, ma'am, they're saying that they know what assessments are and the types of assessments. They already are quite aware of how assessments help in tracking the learner's progress and how also, so they are to some point aware of how to make assessments more inclusive, how to keep the children focused and engaged. Right, sorry. So what they really want to know more about is how to incorporate differentiated assessments, how to manage time, how to give feedback is one thing that they're really looking forward to, how to keep children focused and engaged. That is one of the biggest takeaways they want from here, and how the different tools and ways of assessments, what they are, right? So that is something that they are looking forward to, ma'am.
Right. Okay. So what do we have next, Abha?
So, ma'am, there is another. Now, because the educator at heart always wants to do a lot of assessments, right? I have another assessment for them. So, if I can tell you the question, I want you people, I hope you all have your typing fingers ready. I'm going to ask you a question. Why do you want to attend this webinar series? You have to type one sentence, begin your answer with, I want to attend the webinar series because I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do it. Okay, so everyone ready? Your time begins now. So let's see what kind of answers we're getting. All right. Lots of answers now. Yeah, we're starting to get, there are people who are saying that they want to understand more about formative and summative assessments. Okay. They're attending this webinar because they want to understand that. What about others? Come on, quickly. We want to see you typing. Right. Okay, so you could have things like, I want to attend this webinar series to know how I can make my assessments more authentic, or possibly something like, I want to attend this webinar series to learn about assessments to enhance the teaching learning process.
Okay, Anubha, I have a question now.
Yes, ma'am.
So before beginning this webinar series, we've used 3 tools of assessment.
Yes,
the first tool was administered when we shared the registration form with you. All right. So there were 2 questions in the registration form that, one was like, which are the kind of assessments that you've been using, where
Yes.
you specified that you've been using assessments for learning primarily, and quite a few had responded that you've been using assessment of learning or assessment as learning.
Absolutely.
So my finding was that very few practitioners did mention that they've been using all forms of assessment. Okay,
Right.
and then there were 2 more questions which said that what are the challenges that you face and what are the questions you would like to be addressed in the webinar series. So that was one assessment that we did, and the tool that we used was a Google form, right?
Yes.
Second assessment, when you join the webinar, the second assessment tool that we used was the poll, where you had multiple choice question, because in the registration form, the question type was open-ended and you could respond as per your understanding. But in the poll, you were given multiple choice question, even if you did not know what kind of challenges you may face, there were options for you to critically evaluate whether I face this challenge, whether I face this challenge, or whether I'm wanting to find answers.
Ma'am, there is one question that I have over here. We took 3 different assessments, right? The questions I have is, why were we assessing the same objectives? Was the purpose the same? Why did we do 3 different types of assessments?
If our purpose was to find out your prior understanding, which assessment tool do you think would have been most efficient? If the purpose was to find out your prior understanding, we have 35 minutes classroom, all right? So do you agree with me that the pre-registration form would have been the best choice? Because it saved our time and I walked into the classroom with certain level of readiness, right?
Absolutely. Ma'am, it gave us an understanding of their prior knowledge and what we wanted to build on, right?
Second was the poll for those perhaps who had not attempted that registration, form and maybe joined in without registering. So maybe we wanted them also to gauge their prior understanding. Had my purpose been assessing your language proficiency along with your prior understanding of the assessment, which would have been the best option then? Assessment 1, assessment 2, or assessment 3? Right? Okay.
The poll.
All right. But if I wanted you to write in complete sentences, then perhaps the third way of assessment where you said, I want to join this session. So I need to be very clear about the purpose of assessment, because it's not the nature of the assessment which is important, but the purpose of the assessment which is important. So I need to select the tool of assessment based on the purpose, right? So you need to know the learning goals of your children, what you are assessing them for. So can we move forward, Surya?
Yes, ma'am. But, in my experience, I've always felt that, there's a disconnect between the 2 groups of practitioners who are assessing the learners. So one group is assessing the learners at the foundational stage at the entry level. The group
Anupha, hold on. I want my practitioners to experience one more aspect of assessment while they watch this video. Then I will come back to you. Okay?
Okay, ma'am. Absolutely.
Mrs. Kumar, I always admire the energy you bring to your work with the little ones. It's so different from what we face in high school.
Thank you, ma'am. But honestly, I've been worried about how well we are preparing them for the challenges they'll be facing in your classes later on.
What do you mean?
Well, the curriculum and assessments for grade 10 and 12 are undergoing major changes. There's much greater emphasis on critical thinking, analysis, and creativity.
Oh, absolutely. We are moving away from rote learning and focusing on real-world application, analysis of knowledge to bring in innovations and create bigger things.
Yes. And that's where my concern lies, ma'am. In the foundation years, we often feel pressure to focus on the basic skills and content that we think will help them in grade 10 and 12.
I see. So, you are worried that the current focus in early education might not align with the skills students will need later on.
Exactly, ma'am. We're drilling them on facts and figures, but we're neglecting those essential skills like critical thinking and communication that the new assessment will demand.
It's a valid concern. We need to find a way to bridge this gap. Perhaps we can collaborate more to ensure a smooth transition for students as they move up the grades, right?
That's a great idea, ma'am. Maybe we can share more about the upcoming changes in the assessment with early childhood educators, and we can start incorporating those into the teaching learning process.
Absolutely. We need to work together to ensure our students are well prepared for the future, not just the next exam. We are extremely lucky that Nature Nurture curriculum has already factored in the demands of the future. And therefore, we do domains like FL, GE, and D and T in the foundational years. I'm sure you might be thinking FL?
Financial literacy, ma'am.
Yes, rightly said. And gender equality and design and technology. So all that is taken into consideration. While implementing nature-nurture learning program effectively, we focus primarily on skills and dispositions, which will make our learners absolutely ready for tomorrow.
Okay. So while watching this video, my first question is, why did I stop Anubha? So when Anubha was trying to explain to you, so the classroom could have been shifted to more of an educator-centric classroom. But when we showed this audio visual to you, perhaps there was a break and we used a different methodology to present the same information. That was one aspect. Now, the second aspect of the assessment is that most of the time, foundation years practitioners, they're worried and anxious because they feel that they are not doing enough because the child has to be prepared for exams in higher grades. However, the higher grades practitioners, they feel that the children, come to grade 10, they are not prepared enough. So don't you think there is a need for all of us to synergize right from entry level to the exit level so that there is no disconnect during the course of their education? So this is one important aspect that I would request all my foundation year practitioners to understand, that there is a great paradigm shift in the way we look at education and assessment in higher grades. So we need to be aligned with the latest assessment approaches. So we move ahead now.
Yes, absolutely. So, ma'am, from what you're saying, another thing comes to my mind, often, and I could see it in their responses also, that a lot of educators wanted to have a deeper understanding of, assessments and the type of assessments, the purpose, when to administer, how to administer. So now I'm going to use your suggestion and use a differentiated tool, another video, to quickly summarize and refresh our understanding of the types of assessment. So can we have that video, please?
So what you are trying to say is that you're not telling, you are showing.
Yes.
All right, you are demonstrating. All right.
Absolutely.
About these different approaches to assessment of, for, and as learning. And it's quite interesting.
Yes, Shreya. And I think understanding these different aspects can transform how we assess our young learners.
Absolutely. So let's break it down. Assessment of learning seems pretty straightforward. It's the formal way of measuring what the children have learned. Like those end of term assessments, we often call them the pencil and paper or the summative assessments. Can you see this assessment sheet? This is for grade 1 and it needs to be done at the end of the unit or term.
Right. Those help us gauge if they've met certain milestones like responding to WH questions, reading CVC words, demonstrating an understanding of the grammatical concepts, and so on. Unfortunately, these assessments may not necessarily factor in the last-minute goof-ups by our young ones.
So, Anubhav, what do you mean by goof up?
A goof-up could be a bad day where the learners struggle to recall a particular question, or maybe there is someone who is not well at home. It could be anything.
You're absolutely right. However, do you know, Anubhav, assessment for learning is where the magic happens in the classroom, isn't it? It's those daily observations we make, like noticing who is struggling with spelling conventions, letter sound association, or who is excelling in adding single-digit numbers.
Exactly. And that information helps us tailor our instructions. It happens alongside teaching and learning and daily in our classrooms. Maybe we need to do a small group activity with those struggling with the letter sounds or coding or decoding before they can read sentences, or provide more challenging math games to those who are ready for single-digit additions. The best part of assessment for learning is the interventions can happen alongside.
For example, while I make my learners read a sentence, I can keep aids handy to scaffold them for their letter sounds.
So yes, that's correct. And what about assessment as learning? I love the idea of empowering the kids to become aware of their own learning journey.
Me too. It's like when we ask them to self-assess their drawings or block instructions, they start to recognize what they have done well and what they can improve on. Even while attempting course book exercises like these, they can engage them in pairs and encourage them to self-assess their work and their peers' work as well.
It certainly helps them develop those important self-reflection skills that will serve them well throughout their education.
So, in a nutshell, assessment of learning gives us an overall snapshot. An assessment for learning guides our instructional strategies or the teaching learning so that we can continue to revisit our practices. An assessment as learning empowers our learners to self-reflect and celebrate their small wins and look for windows of opportunities.
Nice summary, Anubha. And I think when we use all three together, we can create a true holistic assessment approach that benefits everyone. Education in true spirit.
Absolutely.
So after watching this video, participants, we can say that assessments are of two types, right? Now let's just quickly summarize together which are the two types of assessments that we're talking about. Can you quickly type in the chat? Let's see. Let's see what they have to say. So they're saying formative. Okay, I've received a couple of direct messages. Let's say formative and summative, ma'am. So there are two types. They're all saying. Okay, FA is right. Two. And then when we look at the formative assessments, right, can we break them down into two categories further? Which are they? The two different types of formative assessments. So we can say that one is the formative assessment can be broken down into assessment as learning, which includes the self-assessment and peer assessment. And the other one is assessment for learning, which is embedded within the teaching learning process and is used to, make changes to adapt your teaching practices so that the children's needs are met. Right? And can we also say that the children, there are various kinds of formative assessments that we're using, assessment techniques that we're using so that we are able to use that because children demonstrate their learning in different ways, right? And what about summative assessments? Ma'am, summative assessments, we all understand, are conducted at the end of the unit. But if we've not done the formative assessments, how may that affect the summative assessment?
I have a question, Anubha. When we do not understand assessment well, what we do, we make formative assessment as summative assessment. So we begin to treat formative assessment as summative assessment. However, we need to treat summative assessment as formative assessments in foundation years, right? When we are doing pen and paper with our young learners, though we may call it summative assessment, but the way the child is conducting himself or herself, the posture, the ergonomics, the grip, the child's ability to sit for a sustained period of time, listen to instructions, that forms the basis of formative assessment. So please understand, when we talk about summative assessment in foundation years, the nature has to be formative because the purpose is to identify the strengths of the children and the gap so that you can modify your teaching learning practices to adjust to their learning needs. And we will take a sample prototype for all of you to gain a deeper understanding into this process. We'll pick up a sample from your classroom, right? So we go ahead. So this is a macroscopic view of your classroom. Can you see? So there are different learners. And what can you see? These are the learning outcomes or the milestones which your learners are expected to achieve. You have your learning outcomes document. So by the end of the unit, you have to achieve these many goals. One thing that you need to understand that you have a learning outcome document which tells you about the learning goals for the entire year. Then you have the learning outcomes for the entire unit and the weekly schedule mapping. You have the learning goal for a week, and those are called your classroom learning goals. So talking about your classroom learning goals, you see that Jasveer is a quick learner and she's already there. And then that, a child becomes very restless and it is very difficult for you to contain the energy of that child because she wants to see what lies ahead. On the other hand, we have this girl called Gatika, who's taking her, sweet time to be able to reach there. Now, for you as a practitioner, the biggest challenge is first, establish where each of my learners is placed in terms of, being able to accomplish the targets or the goals or the tasks that I have defined for them. B, how do I fill in those gaps which are not same for everybody, right? So there has to be equity. Like some children may need additional scaffolding. However, there would be children like maybe Noora and Jasveer. They would want a certain level of challenge. If you do not give them that challenge, they will be restless, they will be running around, they will feel disengaged. So it is a practitioner's dilemma how to strike a balance. So assessment is the summary of what you see on this slide, a macroscopic view. So unless and until you have a clear understanding of your goals and where each one of your learners is placed in that learning journey and how many gaps do you have to bridge, the assessments can never be authentic.
So, ma'am, we've got...
Anubha, I want each one of them to show me a thumbs up if they've understood what I'm trying to convey.
Right.
Right.
So I was asking, ma'am, we've got Gathika and we've got Jasveer at the two ends of the spectrum, right? Jasveer is already there. Gathika is a long way from achieving the goals. What can the educator do to bridge this learning gap?
Anubha, we will talk about it, but first we need to identify, is it an outcome of delayed milestones or the learning level or learning styles or varied intelligences, right?
Right.
So there is a stark difference between the two. There would be some children who would need additional scaffolding to do a particular task. They will need extra time to do that. However, there will be some children who would need a different approach to accomplish those goals within that time frame.
So which also means that differentiated instructions are very important when we are taking assessments.
Yes, differentiated instruction and differentiated assessment is what we are going to talk about, but it's important for all the practitioners to position their learners first in terms of the learning goals they have set out for them. So can we move ahead?
Yes, ma'am. So I think what we can say very clearly from what you have said is that, unless the learning outcomes are, are very, very vital, we need to understand what the goals are. So I can say very clearly that learning is hypothetical in nature, which means that it can't be demonstrated with the mere use of words, right? And its visual evidence can only be obtained by assigning an estimate in the form of an assessment.
Right.
So that is why assessments become very important. I think, ma'am, they also answer one of the questions that a lot of educators had in mind. Should we have assessments?
Right. Because, as a practitioner, we often have this dilemma. Why should we be assessing these young learners? So it is not about assessing them. It's about revisiting our teaching learning practices. I had a very pertinent question in my mind while I was going through your responses, that most of us were not able to put our problem appropriately. We were not able to articulate our challenge. So do you understand? Why? Because maybe we are not too focused on goals. Now look at this picture. Who do you think this girl is? Is she representing me, or is she representing Anubha ma'am, or is she representing the practitioners fraternity?
I personally feel, ma'am, that it is a picture that represents the entire fraternity, because we really need to be focused. We need to know where we're going, right? Otherwise, we're just going to go round and round in circles.
In the morning or day before, if you ask yourself, what is the content that I'm going to cover? It will not take you anywhere. If you ask yourself, what is it that I want my children to accomplish by the end of the session, will keep you focused, will help you assess your teaching learning process well, because this is a question coming from the learner.
Yes. And this question, take a look at it. A situation where the child is asking, if you do not know what we are supposed to know, how would we know? Right? They're all agreeing, ma'am. I can see some thumbs up signs. Very, very important. Like you were saying, to have the bigger macroscopic picture, the classroom goals, the annual goals.
So if we are doing circle time activity and we do not know by the end of this beginning circle, I want my children to express their feelings. I want my children to tell me, what their day looks like, or how was your day? Or I want my children to share their stories from home. I may not be able to steer through the discussion appropriately. So I want my children to have a voice, to express themselves. And where will I get these goals? I will get these goals in the learning outcomes specific to that unit and specific to those weeks, right? So with that,
so ma'am, the learning goals are like the compass. They show us the way. They tell us what to do, which road to go down. And I think also they're able to help us create an understanding of the learning journey if we know what the goals are.
Right, Anubha, we have a map, but we do not know where to go. Does it solve any purpose? We need to identify the place, the destination. So we need to be very specific about our learning goals, and specifically our classroom learning goals, for that particular week, right? So that is very important. Unless and until you are aware and completely in control of your classroom goals, assessments can never be authentic. Teaching learning process can never be genuine, right? So with this,
I think we've been engaging, in some very thought-provoking discussions and some very serious and pertinent questions that crop up every day. So it's time for us to take a quick break, a commercial break, right?
Okay.
sure that was quite energizing to see children at work, you know. And now for a light-hearted moment before we settle down again.
अनहोनी को होनी कर दे, होनी को अनहोनी, अनहोनी को होनी कर दे, होनी को अनहोनी। एक जगह जब जमा हो तीनों,
LO, WSM and ER, LO, WSM and ER.
Refreshing, isn't it? Right. I'm sure you've had a laugh, and it's time to settle down quickly and concentrate, on the rest of the session. Who better than Shivani ma'am to help us settle down and concentrate a little, do a few breathing exercises. I'm sure you're ready. So Shivani ma'am, over to you.
Yes. So everybody, I would want all of you to quickly rub your palms. Come on. Everyone, rub your palms. Open and close your eyes. Open and close your eyes. Right. Okay, so now I want everybody to quickly breathe in. Everyone, do it along with me. Breathe in. Breathe out. Once again. Breathe in. Breathe out. Last time. Breathe in. Breathe in. Breathe in. Breathe in. Breathe in. Okay. So I think at the moment everybody was thinking the buffering is happening. Yes?
Yes, I know this was buffering, right, Shivani? I'm sure they all have a smile on their face. They're all energized. Let's get back. So what's the Bollywood break trio that we had? Ek jagah jab jama ho tino. Can we quickly see which are the three things that we are talking about that can change our lives completely as far as assessments go? Educators? What are they?
Type it in the chat window, everyone. Answers should be pouring in.
Yes. Absolutely. So they're saying LO, WSM, and ER in that order. Excellent. Absolutely. We have already been talking about these three things and how to use them, right? Which are things that we take up in our spade work and training sessions in great detail. So we will not focus on those right now, right? But it is very, very important. These three are your tools, right? That you will be using.
So Anubha ma'am, I would like to add here. So whenever we talk about assessments, it's important to refer to a framework. So every school has its framework, right? And this framework is designed on the basis of the recommendations given by new education policy and National Curriculum Framework for School Education 2023. So please understand, according to new education policy or national education policy, you are not supposed to have summative assessment in foundation years, right? So when we talk about summative assessment, you don't have to allocate marks, but you can allocate some level of measurability in terms of points so that you know where your learners are. Why I'm talking about all these aspects? Because as a practitioner, sometimes you get overwhelmed when the parents reach out to you and ask these kind of questions, ma'am, why aren't you, making them do written assessments and stuff like that? So you need to understand that, yes, it is important for our children to work on their foundational literacy and numeracy. However, it doesn't have to be something which is stressful, but as a tool to measure where my child is. So assessment framework gives you an insight into the proportion of the hands-on learning activities and the summative assessments and when it needs to be done. So can you move to the next slide? So assessment framework will tell you what needs to be assessed, where it is going to be assessed, whether it is going to be assessed on LMS, whether it is going to be assessed through pen and paper, why it needs to be assessed. So why is something that you need to be very clear about, that you need to assess to revisit your teaching learning practices and tailor your instructional practices. And which goals are to be assessed? So if there are 40 learning outcomes that you have, but there are specific which are, foundational in nature, formative in nature. So those learning outcomes need to be emphasized. When do we need to do it? So formative assessment has to be done on daily basis. How you're going to do it, considering the differentiated learning needs of the learners, we will have a run through of that. And how we are going to do and how much we are going to assess the children, that also we will talk about. So can we move ahead? Now, before we move ahead, we have just, we have another video which talks about your fears and worries. It's not that you don't want to assess your children on day-to-day basis. Sometimes you feel limited. Sometimes we feel limited. Even at nature nurture, all of us sometimes feel limited and we feel that we are not equipped enough, competent enough to perhaps harness the energy of every learner in the classroom. So let's hear a conversation which is happening in one of the staff rooms.
Miss Chatterjee, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed lately. We're supposed to be cultivating these 21st century skills in our students, but honestly, I'm struggling.
Oh, tell me more, Ms. Thompson. What's the challenge?
Well, you know my educational background. It's quite traditional. We focused on memorization and following instructions, not so much on critical thinking or creativity.
I understand. We all are victims of the British colonial system that wanted us to be clerks and not critical thinkers.
Exactly. And now I'm expected to teach my little ones how to think critically, analyze information, and be creative problem solvers. It's outside my comfort zone.
I can see how that would be a challenge. But don't worry. You are not alone. Many of us are adapting to these new expectations.
To be honest, it's just that I don't want to let my students down. I see how important these skills are for their future, but I feel limited by my own training and experience.
Anyhow, it's commendable that you are so self-aware. The first step is recognizing the need for change. And there are so many resources and professional development opportunities available to us for upskilling.
Really? That would be wonderful. I'm eager to learn and grow as an educator.
I'm glad that you've expressed your concern. Now, let us work together to deal with this. The Nature Nurture curriculum is a futuristic curriculum, and the constant scaffolding by team members ensure that our capabilities are developed with each passing day. We never feel that we are being taught. However, empathy, synergizing together is their approach to bringing in the transformation. Their well-structured augmentation sessions have something new to look forward to every time. We work as one team where we learn from each other through constant iterations, revisiting our practices and continuous reflections and feedback.
Wow, that would be amazing, Ms. Chatterjee. I'm so grateful for your support and assurance.
Thank you.
So Pooja ma'am, what I see is, that a lot of times we are afraid of what we are doing because we are so invested. But I feel that the first step is to acknowledge that we don't know, acknowledge and accept that we don't know enough. I think that's why all of us are here today, to understand and acknowledge that.
So let's pick up a prototype and delve deeper into it. So,
Right,
Surek,
ma'am.
All right. So this is the backward design. You need to understand and internalize. If you want to make assessments simpler, so you need to understand that your learning outcomes should be internalized here, right? And you should identify the evidences for learning. So when you read your educator reference activity, what could these evidences be? These could be your audio, visual, or maybe a Google form, or your post-it notes or anecdotal records where you are perhaps noting down the progress, and most importantly your educator records. So we will be talking about evidence for learning tomorrow. Right now we will take a sample prototype from NNLP4 language formative assessment. So this is how the assessment looks like, right? So this is the formative assessment and this is the summative assessment. Let's look at it step by step. So can we move ahead? Next slide, Surya. All right. So unless and until you read these instructions, which are given, in the beginning of your formative assessment, you will not be able to conduct the assessment successfully. A, you need to understand they are integral part of your day-to-day teaching. And you have to take this assessment while you are incorporating the weekly schedule mapping. You don't have to take it as a stand-alone assessment. Can we move ahead? All right. What you need to do, you have to pin this assessment on a softboard. Take a printout and pin this assessment on the softboard so that you can quickly identify the questions which you can refer to while you are doing your weekly schedule mapping. So you could, maybe accomplish those goals while doing your course book pages, or by doing your software, or while doing your educator reference activity, right? Is this clear to everybody? Give me a thumbs up, right? So we move next, right? See, if you identify 2 days and you make every learner sit down with you and do the formative assessment, it becomes summative. When you are doing your daily teaching learning, and then perhaps you are identifying 5 to 6 learners who are quicker, right? Like Jasveer. So perhaps you throw a question and she responds, and the learners who need support, they are listening. They are learning from their peers, right?
So what you're saying, ma'am, is that during the teaching learning process, if of my 30 learners, 10 are able to answer regularly, I do not need to take that formative assessment separately for them.
Right. So if I am assessing that my learner is ready to speak in complete sentences using correct sentence structure, this is a learning outcome for NNLP4 child. So let's see. So in the WSM, we will see what do we see. But before that, we will quickly go through the other guidelines also. So we will identify those learners who are quicker and who demonstrate their learning easily, right? And we will still give additional time to those learners who need additional scaffolding, right? We will identify the questions which will fall within the umbrella of that particular weekly schedule mapping. Next, what we do, that some learning outcomes are constantly repeated in every unit. So you don't have to worry. When I say assessment has to be highly iterative or repetitive in nature, that means you can constantly keep revisiting. If my child is not able to speak in complete sentences in unit 1, however, when I look at the learning outcome document, I see it there also. So there's nothing to worry. Do not get overwhelmed. NEP says that we should not talk about just the age appropriateness, but we need to talk about the stage appropriateness also. And this is the pedagogical structure that, across 5 grades, NNLP 2, 3, 4, grade 1 and grade 2. So NNLP 2 is the entry point. So we should not be worried. It's a warm-up time. Children are coming from different backgrounds. So they will be at different levels. Grade 2 is too late. You will miss the bus. So NNLP 3, 4 and grade 1, where you need to position your learners where, right? So we move ahead. And then also we need to understand that if the learners are able to achieve that learning outcome with 80% efficiency, then perhaps, you have reached almost there. So when we are trying to understand the level of accomplishment of learning outcome, we look at 2 aspects. One is the proficiency level, whether the learner is at advanced level or proficient or developing or emerging. And the other is frequency. That if the learner demonstrated this learning outcome today, he demonstrates it after 3 days also, after 7 days also, the frequency. So always, sometimes, mostly, rarely. So these are the two ways of assessing the level of accomplishment of learning outcome. So we move ahead then. And also, if we do assessment for learning on a particular day, it becomes assessment of learning, right? But if you know what is the assessment of learning, by the end of the unit, what is it that you wish to achieve? You break it down into simpler tasks across 7 weeks and you keep assessing it. So we'll show you real-time situations also. So we move ahead, and then it's important that when this assessment is taken as part of the teaching learning process, it is going to be more effective, right? And then you'll be able to identify the learning gaps, and maybe you can give buddies, you can assign buddies, a quick learner with a learner who needs additional scaffolding. And perhaps there is a learner who is just reading words, but by constant scaffolding, after 3 weeks, the learner is able to read sentence also. Do you understand that? So we move ahead. Okay. So now this assessment will have 10 questions. So when this, this kind of formative assessment comes to you, it contains around 10 questions. So let's pick up one example, right? So this is the example that by the end of this unit, my learners will be able to speak in complete sentences. This is the outcome. See, I'm focusing on the outcome. What we do, we begin to ask questions. Oh, these are the 3 questions. We call a learner. We ask 3 questions. We say tick, tick, tick. Done. Assessment done. However, the idea of conducting this assessment is to identify the goal, where we want a learner to reach. Even if my learner is not able to answer or respond to these 3 questions, what can we do? Let's see. This is the WSM. We have at least 4 era opportunities, 2 CSS opportunities for our learners to be able to speak in sentences. Let's see how. Can we move ahead? Next. All right. So when you are doing the era, how was your day? When you are asking your children, what did you do after school yesterday? Did you enjoy doing it? So don't you think it is again, facilitating, the process of empowering your learner to be able to speak in complete sentences? And at that point of time, if your learner responds only in a word or in phrases, that's the time where you need to pitch in and rephrase and ensure that learner speaks in complete sentences. So this is one of the era. Let's move ahead. There's yet another era, even while you are asking your learners to handle their books, right? Sometimes we struggle for words. How to explain to my young learner in a language which is age appropriate. So it's mentioned here. See, I am going to show you how to turn the pages of a book correctly, right? And ensure that you have your learner's attention. Why and where you struggle, you do not keep the attention grabber with you. You do not reiterate the rules enough. You do not have somebody who's taking care of the, different jobs, that taking care of the books. So books are distributed to everybody. So when we do not focus enough on rules, routines, and protocols, managing classroom becomes very challenging. When we are not able to identify how many learners are, active learners, how many learners are passive learners, when we are not observing, we are not being mindful of their learning styles and intelligences, this is where we struggle. So do you think you have to rely on 4 questions which are part of those formative assessments to help the learner begin to speak in complete sentences? Or can we do it by using multiple engagement opportunities that we have every day during circle time or during language, and for that matter, during numeracy and other domains also. So have you got it? So we move ahead. Right? Now you have this. Now I'm talking about NNLP 4. My learning goal is that my learner is able to identify the subject-verb agreement while speaking. So now can you see there was this exercise which was given to you where the story was given to you and you had to identify the length of the sentence or the number of letters in a word. All those practitioners who perhaps attempted those exercise will be able to make connection. So we have given the length of the sentence also for you to internalize that for my NNLP4 learner, if he speaks this much long sentence, it is accepted, right? So this is part of the era again, I am good, where you are sending a circular to the parent and you are also making parents as stakeholders and co-educators in your learning journey. And so they are also shouldering your responsibility of developing the competencies of your learners, right? So we move ahead. So now these are the learning outcomes. So while focusing on language, if we are not mindful of PSED learning outcomes, whether the rules are reiterated, jobs are given, whether we are appreciating learners for making second attempt, whether we are aware of their feelings and respecting them, whether we are asking them to express themselves well. So if we are not mindful of learning outcomes in PSED domain, we will not be able to make our children.
This is what you were saying earlier, ma'am, that the gap, whether it is actually a learning gap or it is a gap because of these factors.
Is it a gap because of behavior?
Yes.
Is it a gap because of attitude?
Lack of engagement.
So we need to identify that. So we move ahead. Now look at the learning outcome. Begin to speak in sentences using correct sentence structure, noun, pronoun, followed by the action in the correct tense. Because as a practitioner, sometimes you are also confused. What do we mean by correct sentence structure for NNLP 4 or for grade 1? So we're going to engage you in a very insightful exercise so that you are able to demonstrate your understanding of these aspects so that you can scaffold your learners well. Can we move ahead? Now, what sentence structures look like at different levels? What can you see here? Quickly read all the sentences. And what do you think, which sentence is most appropriate for NNLP 4? It is about speaking, not writing. And which sentence is most appropriate for grade 1? And which are the factors which are going to influence? Maybe the child is coming. The cultural background is also very important. The kind of language being used at home, the kind of language being used by the parents, the language proficiency of the practitioner, how confident she is when she's communicating to her learners. How about her own sentence structure? Is she using grammar correctly? The syntax part, right? So can you quickly type in the chat window if you are a NNLP 4 practitioner, what do you think your child would be able to? Now here, when we said welcome to the class of 2024, because we have practitioners coming from different parts of the country where the language proficiency level may vary. So you may have different responses and we will respect the responses of each one.
Absolutely. So for me, ma'am, maybe, so I was teaching in a metropolitan city. I would say my NNLP 3 or 4 learner would be able to say Sarah loves strawberry ice cream.
Right.
Yes,
Maybe
see that a lot of the educators are saying that for their NNLP 4 learners.
Right. So if I go to a rural classroom, maybe Sarah loves, and then the child draws a picture. And when I happened to walk into one of the British classrooms and I saw children speaking like Sarah loves strawberry ice cream with maple syrup in a cup, especially on a rainy day. So there's nothing right or nothing wrong, but we need to have some measurability.
Yes.
Be able to feel confident. So let's see what is that measurability. So have you heard of mean length of utterances, MLU? Right? So how many words are there in one utterance and how have the grammar structures been used? So that's very important. That defines the language proficiency of your learners and the complexity of the words. Do they have suffixes, prefixes, right? And then when we talk about, words, we often tend to ignore morphemes, right? One is sad or happy. The other is sadly or happily. I ate my ice cream happy. I ate my ice cream happily. So tell me, which child is more proficient?
So, ma'am, morphemes, I just want to say it so that everybody's on the same page. Morphemes are sounds, meaningful sounds that we can have, right? Yes.
Right. So can we move ahead? We'll quickly, have further insight. Now look at this story. So this is part of your NNLP 4 learning program. Why I'm focusing on NNLP 4 as a sample prototype? It is somewhere between NNLP 3 and grade 1. Because we have ruled out NNLP 2 and grade 2. Why? NNLP 2 is the level, playing field where we are bringing every child on certain level. And grade 2 is too late for us to bring in a lot of changes. So I have picked up NNLP 4. If it says my dog, how many words do we have in the picture my dog? 2. Okay. In the picture, my dog is sitting. How many words are there? How many morphemes are there in the sentence, my dog is sitting? How many morphemes are there? Can you write W, these many, or morphemes M, these many? So represent words by W and morphemes by M, and then write the number. So my dog is word, but sitting would be a morpheme.
Ma'am, we've got answers. They're saying that there are 4 words and 5 morphemes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So how the child is using that, sentence structure defines the, proficiency level of your children. But before that, as a practitioner, we need to understand what correct sentence structure is. I do understand all of you are not English teachers, right? But then when we are talking about being a foundation years practitioner and we are talking about being a homeroom teacher or a mother teacher, this is the challenge that we all will have to embrace, right? So it is very important for us to identify what a sentence structure looks like, right? So we move ahead. I think you all are very, very receptive. So this is the norm, mean utterance length by age. Maybe your child who's in NNLP 2, maybe 3.23, child who's around 4, 3.81, and they will keep oscillating because every child is unique, right? They come from different backgrounds. So this is a basic, mean utterance length. See why NEP is talking or emphasizing on foundational literacy and numeracy, because this forms the basis of all the cognitive processes, because the child has to read and have number sense to be able to approach all these subjects.
Right. So also again, this is the mean utterance length, ma'am, which means that there is, it's the middle of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So there'll be some who will be reading more, some who will be reading less or speaking less.
So we move ahead then. So now how can we enhance or increase the MLU? See, I tell you the problem, but I don't give you the solution, right? So when we talk about increasing vocabulary, so we need to use the word walls generously. We need to read out supplementary stories. We need to install class libraries. We need to engage children in the word games, which are included in ERAs, educator reference activities. And we need to engage them in visible thinking routines, because sometimes children have better vocabularies than, us. We need to accept that we are the learners and perhaps we will learn from. And when you tell them, oh, ma'am doesn't know, can you help me? So they will go back and struggle and juggle, right?
And in fact, if you tell your children to bring 2 words, that you can use instead of good, I had a good day, you will have a list of 40.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have been able to think of that yourself.
Right? So that's the challenge. And then you have to increase use of grammatical markers. So whenever the child is speaking in incomplete sentences, use technology. If you are struggling with language yourself, use technology to rephrase, identify correct sentence structures. I'm not a language teacher, but whenever I struggle with language, perhaps I use technology to fine tune. I use Grammarly. I use so many technological tools because we are 21st century practitioners. So your ability to learn will take you miles. Don't feel upset if you do not know, because there are 100 ways of finding your way, right? So you need to engage them in storytelling, role plays, conversations, audiovisuals, and asking a lot of questions. And How do you expand their MLUs? Is helping them rephrase by adding words and grammar structures. Like if the child said, I love ice cream. So probably you can add, or Sarah loves ice cream. So he says, Sarah loves ice cream in a cup. So maybe the child who says Sarah loves ice cream, we add in a cup. Maybe the child who says Sarah loves ice cream in a cup, we add 2 more words for that child. Now you understand the differentiated instruction? Okay, Sarah loves ice cream. Can you go back to that slide? So let them see also.
Yes.
No, the bigger. Yeah.
So, that's where you start to add the describing words.
Right. So
Yeah,
ice
the
cream with
words.
maple syrup. So you're adding vocabulary and you are adding more of visual imagery, right?
True.
So can you see this maple syrup and you show the picture also? So picture speaks, 1,000 words. And in this journey, learn with your children. You have 30 practitioners and teachers in your classroom. Do you understand that? So we move ahead. Go back to the same slide. We'll move forward. Yeah.
The next one.
Next one. So this was the exercise. So when we design a story and we are deciding the sentence length, you will see that there will be 3 types of sentences. One sentence will have around 4 to 5 words for those children who are beginners. Few sentences will have 5 to 7 words for those children who are probably developing. And there will be some sentences with 8 to 9 words for those children who are proficient. The same applies to vocabulary. So within every lesson, there is some sort of differentiated instruction happening. So when you're making your children read, so you invite those children who are beginners to read small sentences, those children who are developing to read medium sentences, and those children who are, so that in that way you're matching the challenge level of every learner. But for that, you need to know the learning levels of every child that you have to keep observing on day-to-day basis. So when we say, and there are simple formulas, we pick up those texts, there are softwares, we put the text and we find out what is the reading age of this text. So when we put this text, what you can see in front of you, so it says somewhere around 5 to 6 years. So it's meant for grade 1, right? So as storytellers or curriculum designers, there's so much of research that goes into designing the content or the pedagogical practices. But you are the people, you are the torchbearers who are taking it, to your learners. So unless and until you understand the rationale behind each one of them, perhaps you will face real-time challenges in your classroom. So we go ahead. So we have 5 minutes to go, but then if you end the class when you are not expecting, you have your aha moments, right? So it's 5 minutes to 6:30. So it's time to take a quiz as part of the formative assessment. You quickly either scan this QR code or Surya, can you put the link in the chat window? So even if you're not able to take this quiz, because we'll give you just 2 minutes, do not worry. It will be pasted in your respective WhatsApp groups also. Is that right? Yeah. So you can scan and quickly. And how does it look like? Can you open that quiz? Right. Here it is mentioned 5 minutes, but I'm sorry, I'll give you 2 minutes because we're running short of time. But then you can submit it. So whatever we've been talking about, so that's a formative assessment for learning, so that I can visit your responses and tailor my tomorrow's webinar. Do you understand? Based on how my children respond in the class today, I fine-tune my lesson for tomorrow. And that's the purpose of conducting a 3-day series, that every day what I learn from you, every day what I learn about you, every day what I learn for you is reflected in the classroom. You get that? So these are the questions that you have to attend. So can we move ahead?
Yes. So I think, ma'am, today's, session has been quite eye-opening. I think for most of us, we've started to understand how to take the assessment. I think that is one of my biggest takeaways from today's session, the formative assessment, the purpose, and also where in my teaching learning process, I am going to be able to assess my learners. Not just those two questions, but the learning outcome, if that is clear, I don't even need to have only that question to assess the learning outcome, right? So I think that is
I would
one.
like to share my aha moments. Each time I saw all of you smiling and I saw twinkle in your eyes, I felt rewarded. So that is my only reward for being a practitioner. Do you understand? If you're able to apply what you've learned in your real life is the real takeaway, right? And if you feel that, yes, definitely, this was a session where you felt benefited, then perhaps the whole exercise is more meaningful. And the evidence of learning I have, perhaps gathered through your smiles, through your kinesthetic responses, through your chat windows. And tomorrow I'm going to, study all of them and come back with more, energy and enthusiasm.
Right. And I would also want, ma'am, as they're signing off, I would surely want to see which of their questions got answered today. So if you can write that in the chat, that would be lovely. So one of your, the questions you had in your mind, which of them got answered today, that would be wonderful for us also to understand, right?
And if you want to take some time and reflect upon that, so you can fill in the Google form, right? Yeah.
So we are getting answers. What are morphemes, how to make assessments easy.
With this, Anupama ma'am, with this, it's time to say bye to each
Bye
one
to
of
them.
you. They might be having some engagements, which we respect.
Absolutely, ma'am.
So,
Yes. So, all right. Looking forward to meeting you all tomorrow. Same time, same place, right? 3:45, so that we can begin and end in time. See you all. Bye-bye.
If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, and walk across the water. You feel defeated, falling on your knees and looking up for some hope tonight. You try to stand up, but you throw your hands up like you no longer have the strength to fight. 'Cause you've seen too many sunsets, too many days ending in the darkest night. But on your own, you'll never know, you'll never know. If you believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water, the water. Believe you can move the highest mountains, cross the greatest oceans, walk across the water. If you believe. They say that all you need is faith, but it's almost like you lost your way. Took a few wrong turns, took a few breaks, falling behind now looking for grace. 'Cause you need someone to lift you up, yeah, make right all the things you've done. 'Cause on your own you'll never know, you'll never know.